Then he opened their minds to understand the Scriptures. Every time I read that, I think, what about the rest of us? Sure, you open the disciples' minds to the true meaning of the Scripture, or at least a lot of it. But the rest of us have to muddle through it. Martin Luther went off on a rant once. Well, he went off on lots of rants because that's kind of what he did. But the one that's important for us today is he went off on this rant about how wrong it was for God to place Adam and Eve in the same place as that cunning serpent. His idea is that they were so woefully unprepared for things like deceit and trickery that it was irresponsible of God to have left them so unprepared to face the world. A lot of times this is how I feel about the Bible. About having the Bible without an owner's manual. It's right up there with God giving us children without any kind of guidebook about that. We are woefully unprepared. And yet here we are, reading the Bible every Sunday. Which brings us to this preaching series, Troublesome Texts. I was going to call it 7 Deadly Texts, but I don't have 7 Sundays before Reformation. And other than hoping that you were all really bad at math, I decided to go with good old-fashioned alliteration. Troublesome Text with a capital T. Now you might have your own troublesome text that springs to mind the minute I say that I'll be preaching on it. I want you to take a moment now and turn to your neighbor, your neighbors, and ask them what texts bother them. What do they do when they come to a place in the Bible that does not connect to the world that they live in? Do they ignore it? Do they move on? Do they try to make sense of it? What do they do when they come to that bit of the Bible where things just don't make sense? Take a moment, talk to your neighbor about this, and then we'll pick up in just a couple of minutes. So be efficient. Chances are, I'm probably not going to get to the troubling text that bothers you. Primarily because we've got a big Bible. A lot of things happen in there, and like I said, we don't have an owner's manual. I'm going to tell you 3 right now that, when we just think about what's in the Bible, there's a man that lives in a big fish for 3 days. There is a talking donkey that explains things to his master in the Bible. And my favorite, there is a point in the Bible where zombies storm Jerusalem. It's actually in there, believe it or not. I'm not going to be talking about those right now. There are too many things to talk about. So I had to target some. I targeted the things that bother me the most, or have bothered me in the past. The first is ascension. Jesus floating up to somewhere. Where did he go? 2, the second one. We come to the place where Jesus forbids something that has a strong connection to a lot of our lives. Jesus seems to forbid divorce. What are we supposed to do with that? Number 3, the end of the world. It comes up quite a bit, and Jesus says something strange. He says, this generation will not pass away before some apocalyptic things take place. But the problem, we're still here, and that generation is fairly long gone. Number 4, prayer. We have to talk about prayer. Jesus says we have the power to move mountains. Yet most weeks we can't pray away a common cold. And 5, finally, what about free will? You have the Pharaoh who has his heart hardened, where he cannot truly let my people go. In this life we see things as a one-time shot. We don't generally think about the idea of reincarnation. So what are we to do with only some being given a chance to see the way, the truth, and the life, while others seem almost hindered? Those are my 5 that I'm planning on preaching on. Last time I had a preaching series, I got the flu, so there's 5 that'll probably happen, but we'll see what we get to. And then eventually, someday later, we'll talk about Balaam's talking donkey and the zombie invasion. But first, ascension. Let's get the words right and go back to our gospel. While he was blessing them, he withdrew from them and was carried up into heaven. Every single time I read this, I wonder, did he go up and hide behind a cloud until they weren't looking? Did he journey up into space? Can Jesus somehow breathe and function in space? With what we know about up, where did he go? I think we'll have to begin with a science lesson. A first century science lesson, which is, of course, the most entertaining kind of science lesson. So if we could get that picture up. So this was the universe as they knew it. I tend to think about it as humanity in a snow globe. But you have Earth in the middle, this kind of just flat, rocky space. And then underneath it, you have this underworld, where some say everybody went, some say the bad people went. And then all around it, you have the ocean of heaven, which is where we get things like rain, or say, maybe you wanted to flood the world for 40 days and 40 nights. That's where you get that water. They really thank God for keeping the waters of chaos at bay. Those are the waters of chaos. And then the stars in the sky are not suns like you would think they are. That's where God's radiance is breaking through the holes in the protective layer keeping the ocean water at bay. That's what the stars were. And then beyond that, you have God's home, the heaven of heavens. So obviously this wasn't agreed upon by everyone, but it was the common understanding of the day. So down was bad, up was God. So Jesus going up made perfect sense. He was going to God. The problem is that we now know a little bit more about up. On April 12, 1961, Russian cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human to travel into space and orbit the Earth, where he supposedly said, legend tells us he said this famous phrase, "I don't see any God up here." And whether or not you buy into the Eye of God nebula, which is supposedly a picture taken in space of this creepy God eye forever staring at us deep in space, the point is the same. It's hard for modern day believers to answer in any credible way where exactly Jesus went when he ascended. We generally come into two camps. One, I don't understand it, but it happened. Or two, it didn't happen, it's just a story. Those are generally where most people fall. But I'd like to give you a third option. Pastor Adrian's option. And the third option begins with a miracle. A fairly pointless miracle. And by fairly, I mean really. You see, there were 4 good Catholic monks sitting down for a meal of meat on Thursday. It was Thursday evening. And as usually happens when you get 4 church nerds together, they spent the entire night arguing theology, which for you sounds incredibly boring. For church nerds, it's a good time. So, in between bitter Latin words and holy spittle, these monks continued to pick at their meat until one of them eventually realized that they had done the unthinkable. They had eaten meat on a Friday. Like your gasps sound now. Since you're all up on your Catholic theology, I will remind you why that's a problem. You know, I'm sure you've all read Canon Laws 1249 to 1253, but I'll just, a little refresher. It's pointed out in this canon law that Christians must do penance as part of our faith. And everyone knows that the day of Christian penance is Friday. And the main way to do Christian penance is to give up meat on Fridays. But you can still eat fish. No, I don't know why. No, that does not make sense. But that's the law. So you see, these monks had done the unthinkable. They had broken their penance by not spotting the transition between Thursday and Friday. This brings me to my favorite Monty Python line from The Life of Brian. It's actually an outtake. The shepherds are sitting in the field waiting for Jesus or Brian. And one of the monks, or one of the shepherds, looks over to the other one and he says, "Is it AD yet?" It's hard for us to spot the transition between important moments. The monks had missed the transition between Thursday and Friday. They were shaken. They were saddened. Until someone bothered to inspect the meat, only to find that it had been changed into fish. They had been saved by God when God transmorgified their tasty meat into disgusting cold fish. Hallelujah! Thank you, God, for showering your blessings down on earth by doing that. You could have tackled cancer, but thanks for the salty salmon. Now, this practice of abstaining meat on Fridays has lessened over time. In 1966, they almost completely got away from it. But the truth of this miracle is hard for me to deny. Mainly because who would make that up? Who would make up that story? Of all stories. This miracle, by far, is the most useless, unnecessary, inconsequential miracle I have ever read. And I've read a lot of miracles. And if I'm willing to allow the possibility of this miracle, it completely changes how I understand the ascension. And it's this. God, time and again, works through the boxes we create in order to reach us no matter what. Even if the boxes we create are absolutely wrong. Here's a small example that I know pretty much all of you have gone through. Let's say you prayed for something to happen. Something you knew you really wanted. And to your surprise, your prayer is actually answered, and you're given that thing that you prayed for. Only to find that at that moment, it's the last thing you actually want. Here's an example. Let's say you got out of a relationship, but you realized you wanted to be back in that relationship. So you prayed to be back in that relationship, only to be reminded that it was a horrible relationship and you were happy to get out. But you prayed for it and it happened. Or another one. You pray to get a job, but you find out it's a bad fit. Or you're lonely and you pray that anyone will call you on the phone, only to pick up the phone and find out that it's the most annoying person that drives you crazy is on the other line. Ring any bells? Anyone? And if we believe God knows everything and wants what's best for us, why would God grant this thing that is clearly not in our best interest or even right? Because God works through the boxes we create in order to reach us no matter what, even when our boxes are fundamentally wrong. Let me ask this in another way. What else could Jesus have done in that time period, that first century time period, knowing what you know about their worldview, to assure them that he had defeated death in a way that they would actually believe? He could have disappeared in front of them, but then he would have been a ghost. He could have spread word that he had returned and then never actually show up. But in those days, a Messiah appeared about every month, so it would have been nothing new. It wouldn't have been surprising. If Jesus wanted to get through to the people of his day, he did the only thing he could think of to break through the hardened hearts of that day. He flew. In order to get through to us, Jesus broke every bit of the natural order. He defeated death, the law, and now gravity. Which brings us to today's real question, which is the question you're probably all wondering right now. Okay, cute theory, Pastor, but what does that matter? What does it matter one way or the other? So, okay, he flew. Good job. You did a good job with the text. The problem is that we're still doing it. We are squeezing God into smaller and smaller boxes, making it harder and harder for God to be God in this world. How many times have we said the phrase, if God were real, God would save my friend, end this war, make life easier. You name it, we've thrown it at God. Here's another popular one. God hates those people. And God is going to judge those people. God isn't going to judge me or my family or my crazy uncle because God is merciful, but God is going to judge those people I don't like. And God is going to judge them harshly. And then here's the one where the church gets into danger. We say the phrase, I'll leave it up to God. And then we do nothing about it. We come up with this grand vision of where we think God is calling us, where God wants us to go, but then we don't do any of the work. We just leave it up to God to get it done. For if God really wanted it, surely God would take care of it. Sounds familiar? I know I'm guilty of it. But I guess the real question of all of this of this sermon, of this ascension of our boxes, is how pointless do you want the miracles of your life to be? Do you want meat to fish miracles? Or do you want feeding 5,000 miracles? Do you want ascending into space miracles? Or swords into plowshare miracles? The God that actually exists can be the most powerful force in this universe and in our lives, but only if we allow it. Amen.